And thank you again for coming to this event. And I'm Kamil Kanga. I'm the director of the University of the Center and also an assistant professor of civil engineering at City College of New York. And this panel is really to look at what research can be done around this type of initiative in CAF-FIDE. We need the research to inform the policy that might take place. And we assembled some great colleagues. We have Sarah Kaufman from the Rubinstein Center of Competition Policy and Management at NYU. Alison Conway, my colleague at City College and Civil Engineering. And John Fato at NYU, Tandem School of Engineering, and also the chair of the University Competition Research Center. We're going to have the panelists to discuss a little bit about the research that they're doing. We selected it on purpose because most of the research that they're doing is related to non-motorized form of movement. Sarah did a lot of study for the center on the bike. Alison did a lot of study of good movement, and John also on traffic and urban in the city. Just as an introduction, because I'm not going to moderate this part, I was looking at the literature if there was any research done around this type of strategy. And I found that there's very few. You don't see that many academic research around CAF-FIDE. But there's few studies that have been done and some case studies that have been done. And I found out that this initiative started in Bogota, in Colombia, around 1974. That have been expanded. It was been successful. It have been expanding all over the world. And it's usually done, it's not just a one day in Colombia, it's every summer, and they're doing very frequently every summer. When they flow from 9 kilometers to 120 kilometers roadway that the car won't have access. And some people did some study and found and look at the impact of those flow pressure. So there's most of those closures take place in urban settings, where the programs that are there, and some of the programs receive public financing and public funds to support it. That's also something that we are talking about the funding. It's not free. You have to invest into it to do it, and usually there's really great support for the community. There's most of the time community are not really against this type of program because it's also a way to generate some social event, free event, and get people to network. And the participation for those programs around America maybe tends from 60 to more than 1 million people who are participating. And the cost is not really too expensive, but some programs is still at the average from $45,000 to $2 million. So most of those type of events is really to promote social well-being, to reduce the environmental pollution, and also it seems like it provides employment because it's temporary employment to provide this type of activity. In the US, one case study that I found in literature, the one that done in San Francisco, that is done on Sunday also, and they're closing the street on Sunday, and they're closing from different parts of the city, different. So it's not just one location that they close, but they're moving around a city each month, and they close it. And the study that have been done, and usually the closing is to provide open space for safe, car-free recreation. It serves as a model for open space initiatives, and also to strengthen the network between communities. That's what they do. And it's organized by the San Francisco Municipality Competition Agency, and it's a non-profit partner with DOT who manage the day-to-day event. Study have been done, evaluation study regarding the San Francisco one, and the finding a lot of support from small business who support the Sunday Street road, increase of 44% of business report, 44% of businesses reported an increase in customer activity and sales during the street road. The net increase in revenue on the Sunday Street is compared to non-Sunday Street road. So there's an increase of economic activity. Some restaurants report a little bit increase in terms of people that work in the restaurant, maybe because they have from first hand and that from the temporary event. So in New York, with the Academy, we plan to see what type of study can be done to really evaluate, assess the speaker in New York. I'm going to start with Sarah, that might talk about her takeaway, and she might talk about some of the study that she has done in terms of using non-organizing.
Thanks, Sunil, and thank you, Commissioner, for inviting me here today. In terms of transportation in New York City, the NYU Rudin Center focuses on the fact that we have many options, and we have two primary areas of study right now at kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. One is City Bike and one is paratransit. In terms of City Bike, we see that most people are using City Bike as a last mile solution. And it's everyday New Yorkers using City Bike, not necessarily tourists. And so when we expand City Bike, we'll see it as a more realistic option for the outer boroughs in Bronx and farther out in Queens and Brooklyn, and perhaps Staten Island as well. It would be highly beneficial to expand the system. We will experience more diversity in terms of users. Right now, City Bike is seeing predominance of higher income users who are male and tend to be younger. But when we expand the system, we will see more users because the system will expand to residential areas, which will include more types of neighborhoods, more types of users. And especially we have a gender divide with City Bike that is not fully addressed at this point, but it's directly related to both safety and perceived safety of riding bikes around the city. As we expand City Bike to residential areas, we'll see more users who can ride in relative safety on the streets because they won't feel like they're competing with the trucks of Midtown Manhattan. So we will see a greater diversity in gender and other demographics of users as City Bike expands. And I do think that will promote less car usage, even on an occasional basis, but it will have an impact. The other side of the spectrum that we're working on at the NYU Rudin Center is looking at paratransit, which is transportation services for people who are physically or cognitively unable to use the mass transit system. That's a system that is massively inefficient right now and must undergo several changes. We recommended technology improvements in a kind of sister report with the Citizens Budget Commission, where they recommended business management improvements. The NYU Rudin Center report, we focused on technology improvements, one of which is partnering with things like ride-sharing companies like Uber, Lyft, and Via, and of course tapping into the vast taxi network, which will be 50% accessible by the year 2020. So we do need to address transportation options for all New Yorkers, as commented earlier, that we can't just hit certain demographics. And so that's what we're looking at the Rudin Center. To get people out of cars, we need to make it easy for them to find other ways.
Okay, Alisa?
So I primarily work in goods movement and specifically an area called city logistics, which is looking for sustainable ways to move freight in urban areas. First, I'd just like to acknowledge the councilman and the first panel who gave a lot of good discussion on freight issues, which is actually very unusual to hear at an event like this. So I was really happy to hear that those issues have risen to the point of actually being discussed. Because I think the first step, that there's a couple different areas of research that need to be done, but the first and most important is getting a handle on what is generating freight demand in the city. Unfortunately, historically, in the US and basically everywhere in the world, we draw a line between freight, which is private industry's problem, and the movement of people, which is the government's problem. So from a public sector perspective, we have very little data on what's happening at the local level in terms of freight. We don't understand why deliveries are happening at the time they do, what types of vehicles are being used for those deliveries. Those data sets just don't exist. So most of my research literally relies on open data sets that weren't necessarily generated for freight. We map where are their trucks getting tickets for being parked in the bike lane. That allows us to go out and say, okay, there's a problem here. Then I have my undergrads stand on the street corner and count and time vehicles so that we can get a handle on what those differences are. And we can see some really interesting things. The councilman mentioned distribution and micro-distribution. Micro-distribution is already happening in New York City on the public street space. We've got a couple major operators who may offload a truck into a parking space. That parking space may be in a travel lane, it may be in a loading zone, and they're basically doing micro-distribution already. What we need to do is figure out how can we formalize that process, maybe make it a fair process so that different actors can compete on the same level playing field. The second point I want to make about freight research, and this is not just in New York City, but it's everywhere in the US, compared to some of our international partners, we don't do much experimenting with solutions like micro-distribution centers because of the risk trade-offs and the optics of risk trade-offs. So no government agency wants to be responsible for working with implementing a pilot that fails. And no industry wants to be responsible for the financial risk of taking on that pilot project. The European Commission funds all kinds of multi-city studies where there's these solutions actually get tested at a small scale, and then those results are replicated across cities. There are a number of reasons for that. We have interstate commerce laws. We have different government structure than in those countries. Those are issues that we certainly have to overcome, but the lack of experimentation with innovative solutions is a real challenge.
Okay, maybe John?
Yeah. So I'd like to pick off on comments that Andy and Lois made earlier. And the lady from RPA, that somehow when we're thinking about the transportation goals that we're trying to achieve, see, get rid of the car, or maybe it holds the city car free. That's a goal where there's not a lot of real laws that prevent it from happening. Chief among them is that we have a system that doesn't allow for people traveling from one place to another without the car. Andy mentioned it limits it. We have to allow people to get into the transit system that is there, allowing there is no capacity to handle the additional travel that would come from the car mode. Behavior, as far as people willing to do this. What kind of impact would leaving the car at home and taking transit have on the trip itself? There are people that come into the city, 700,000 people a day in the city. These people come from outside of the city. And if so, why are they coming back? Why are people spending half an hour, 45 minutes to get across the river in the morning, maybe even later in the evening? Is it because they love the car? We have to look into that. Why is it? Is it that the system is not there to prevent them from experiencing that kind of commute? And we lack the investments in the transit system that is needed, in the way we develop land out there that allows low density sport development to happen and creates the need to use the car. So there is a need there for people coming to the city to use the car. This thing about creating traffic-free zone is in the city where it's a congested city. The reason the city is congested, the way I look at it, is because the density of development is so high. The number of vehicle miles per square mile in New York City is very, very high. And the reason for that is not because the car usage is so high, it's because the density is so high. The car usage in this area is the lowest in the country. So how much lower can you get to get rid of the car in Manhattan is the question. So I think what we have to do, in my mind, is to realize that there are limits because we don't have a transportation system that really is a system that is a patchwork of different projects that came together and now we call it a system. We don't have a governance that looks at the system like we refer to cities in Europe that behave differently, but at the same time they have a centralized, systematic way of looking at the problem. Here we have local control, we have home rule, we have all sorts of things that interfere with the system approach to it. In fact, in reality, we have an open system, we have a complex system, and we have a system we have a hard time at getting handled for a number of reasons, technical as well as political, primarily political. So the question is, what do we want to do? How can we live with the car? Right? How can we live with the car is the question. And here's where I think we ought to think about the possibilities of achieving that goal rests on the performance measures we use, the use of organization in the car. And so, in terms of real progress, tangible progress, that I can see made, not only, Earth Day is a great opportunity to demonstrate how much better it would be without a car. And it's fine, and everybody somehow embraces that view. But how can we retrofit the street network designed to move traffic into one that is where the pedestrians need a station? And to start that, we have to think about what performance metrics led us to where we are. The highway capacity management was created back in the 50s to focus the priority of mobility on the car. And therefore, we are stuck with that kind of mindset that has created a whole discipline of traffic engineering that focuses on driver mobility. It doesn't focus on pedestrian mobility or bicycle mobility or transit mobility. It's car mobility. It's the driver that matters. If you think back, how long did it take for the driveway that drives on Central Park to be car free? I mean, that was the most obvious place where you say cars don't belong here. Well, they were concerned about the traffic engineering viewpoint, looking at the HCM criteria, that my God, you have this traffic on the set, in the parkways, now going into Fifth Avenue, into Central Park. It's congested here, it's going to congest there, it's going to delay the traffic movement. So that was the only criteria. They didn't think about the importance of removing traffic and vehicles from an environment that's basically a pedestrian environment. Right? So that took a long time. And finally, this mayor was able to push it and demonstrate that it's okay, you can live without that, regarding Central Park. So there are all benefits that were accrued because of that. There should be some documentation, some kind of performance criteria applied to be able to show the benefits you get by removing cars from certain places. And only then can you then use that experience and move it somewhere else. That's why what Cubic was saying earlier this morning about before and after comparisons, indicating the benefits you get and the costs that may associate with that approach, may be very important to build on a library of experiences that will move us from where we want to be where we are still there. So then we need to change this car culture, this culture of relying on the car mobility culture has to be changed. And to do that, we also have to consider that if we don't do that, if we don't change the viewpoint of investing in highways and streets because the metric is car mobility, is vehicular mobility, we're going to wind up with an infrastructure that is basically around the car. That's what we have in suburban areas. That's what we have in larger metropolitan areas. The car is the dominant mode. 95% of people use the car because it's being facilitated. By the analysis made that in order to improve mobility, by car, you need to have more highways. Okay, so how do we do that? the research that we need to undertake then is to identify new performance metrics that will enable the evaluation of mobility across all modes, including pedestrians and other human-powered modes. So we have to have that metric that tells us that if we address these modes and mobility is being changed to the level that we desire, then we are justified in investing in those facilities. Some of the metrics that could help us achieve that goal is, to measure how easy to access activities that are within reach of our trip. Within the zone and streets that are impacted, what is the access to opportunities that are being promoted by different modes? And so you can compare walking, biking, transit, car, whatever, along that concept is access to activities. And you may find that, if you lose travel time using a car because you displace the one lane away from the traffic on a particular road that has the opportunity to do that, even though it increases the delay of the traffic, but that of pedestrians and bikers is enhanced. The activity that they can perform in reaching what they want to do is enhanced because within 20, 30 minutes of time, you can achieve many more activities than you can if you just wait to use the car in suburban settings. So the amount of street space allocated and used by each travel mode should be identified. And the business impacts of allocating street space to favor pedestrian movement should be measured. We heard this morning that that activity was undertaken and there was a sort of a surprise. We hear from Times Square what happens in the closure of Broadway in that area. The businesses there didn't lose any revenue, and the people who are there are happier. So that should be documented and archived to be able to use as arguments to move to the next level. To the next point of interest. I think impacts of conflicts, the whole area of safety is generated. This Vision Zero, reducing conflict, reducing crashes, and so on, is based because you reduce the conflicts. If you reduce the conflict between vehicles and pedestrians in a space that they share, you're likely to reduce the severity of crashes or even the number of crashes. If the speed differential between vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic is lower, you can. So you could think about pedestrian zones instead of, say, the car-free zones. Pedestrian zones would be those that the speed of travel by motor vehicles is compatible with the speed of travel of pedestrians. So you can have this activity be complementary and producing the kind of results or outcomes that one should and then the changes in crashes and injuries, deaths and so on by mode could be identified and measured. The noise impacts, the pollution impacts are very important to do these measurements before you do something and after you do something. The tendencies from the DOT perspectives is that they're waiting so long to get something, or finally they get the approval, they get the money, they want to do it right away, and they don't use those resources to lay out another 2 months or whatever that you need to document what you were before, what was existing before. So you can measure the effectiveness of what you did in terms of the benefits you created and the costs associated with that. This is very seldom has been done. And I think it's important for us to absorb that culture that says, what benefits that we see from this investment? The bikes that we have there, the bike routes that we have there, the very fact that they are so popular, so that's fantastic. But why is it, what benefit are they providing to the mobility of the area? Well, we heard what the studies show. It would be good to know how many of these bike riders are substituting their trip that was made by a car, for instance. Are they reducing car usage, or are they adding to the traffic stream that has to be handled? That means, what are you going to do about the bikeways that are needed to protect the safety of the bikes? So it's not just a question of putting, in my mind, putting bike routes or bike lanes all over the city, but it's also to look at the effect that these have on quality of mobility for everybody on that space. And benefits as they are demonstrated are very real, but it will be better to know if, in fact, they have other attributes that we are not measuring. So, what potential locations can we think about to basically retrofit the existing space and make it compatible with the presence of automobiles and vehicles? Back in the 70s, like Buzz was saying, late 70s and so on, New York City DOT had a contract that I was involved with in creating traffic zones. Traffic zones were thought to be the answer to the increasing pollution that was being experienced. There were a lot of hotspots with carbon monoxide that needed to be addressed. We were exceeding safety limits, and the administration at the time was thinking of maybe we can restrict the number of vehicles coming in and out. And so we were looking at traffic zones, and they were there was many spots that could merit reducing the access of cars into those areas and reducing the congestion and the facility. But somehow, later on it was found that the hotspots were not as severe as they thought, because there was a new EPA model that came out and said, we don't have a problem with car pollution anymore, with carbon monoxide pollution anymore, so the whole thing was fine. So today, if we really want to be serious about improving the quality of life for our neighborhoods, we ought to really state that. And that's why, in that sense, we have to identify places that we can start with. I can think of a few places that I observed over the last couple of weeks or so, as I was thinking about what we're going to talk about today. And you can see that Greenwich Street, for example, from Elmore to Chambers Street, would be a candidate street for pedestrianization. What level of pedestrianization you want, you can try based on the reactions you get from the people that are on that street. The landlord, who live there, the people who have businesses there, restaurants and so on, and get their ideas on how they could maybe benefit from that. And then incorporate a design and a process that allows control of car traffic on the street much more than it is today. So maybe that could be stopped. I know the area of car zones, super blocks today, perfect super block. Looks like really not much better. The knowledge of the area itself is the Washington Square area. It's a 32-block area between Waverly Place, Broadway, West Austin, and 6th Avenue. Narrow streets, a lot of pedestrians, a lot of students. And that could be an area that could merit a real plan to make it pedestrianized, not because of anything else, but just to make life there more enjoyable and more sustainable. So what should be done to get it started? You could begin by saying, well, maybe no through traffic is allowed in the streets. You could create cells, that any vehicle and traffic that moves in has to exit, because it's not going to be encouraged to, but at the same time you can serve local businesses and so on that need access for their deliveries and etc. So ban traffic on there, you would reduce traffic intrusion into the area by looking at the concept that no through traffic should use the streets. And you start with that, and then maybe you move to the next step, depending on what the outcome is of that. In the question of when would you do that, well, you could do it on designated days, you could do it on part of the day, you could do it every day, depending on the desire of the neighborhood to live there. Just change the culture slowly. Because the culture right now is being shaped by the car. Right? Whether we like it or not, mobility by car is the thing that we want to. Every transportation department, at city, state level, and so on, they look at the condition of mobility by looking at the vehicles. and they do anything they can to speed up the flow of vehicles. And pedestrians, are not really in demand. Right? Or they are in demand, but they are unmitigated things that we need. And so, to conclude then, I think if we focus on some areas that we feel have the potential to benefit from less traffic on them, instead of necessarily closing them to traffic, because that may be too much of a shock, then we should document what we see in this area before the experiment is done, evaluate what's happening, and then move on from there. So that's the way I would look at it.
Okay, great. And thank you. You really summarized maybe that we need a benefit, we need to measure the performance. I'm going to go back to Sarah because she did a lot on city life. And we're looking in terms of research, what does the research need that you think that can actually improve the type of stuff that you come to demonstrate to and inform the policy for car-free?
Sure. John, you brought up several good points, but one I'd like to touch on a bit more is the discussion of data sources. And so right now our data sources are somewhat limited, but I do believe that cities, New York and elsewhere, need to start partnering with more technology companies to start gathering this data. Every time we're in a car or a bus or on a bike, our cell phones are aware of these kind of movement and vibration patterns, and they are collecting this data whether we're aware of it or not. Cities need to start working on this data. We can start addressing characteristics of neighborhoods, for example, to see when people are biking, when they're taking the bus, when they're driving, so that we can start to really get a good look at how people are getting around. Right now we use the census, which as we know is a snapshot of travel that is not collected very regularly. But if we can kind of aggregate this data that these companies see on a micro level, but if we arrange to acquire that as academic institutions or as a city, we can really start to make progress on understanding the travel patterns that we are trying to perpetuate or modify. So I think that it's, in terms of research needs, that's what we need to start acquiring is data, both from cell phone companies and from car sharing companies and other companies that operate within the city boundaries.
And now to Alison, maybe I'm going to talk at the council member. You mentioned the e-bike. I know you work a lot on non-motorized mode to move freight. So maybe how you see the type of research that can be done to actually inform the policy if you want to authorize e-bike in the city.
So e-bikes, I'll address
Maybe
freight generally,
freight,
more
yeah,
than
in general.
e-bikes specifically. So first, we've got a bigger issue with freight, and that's as I mentioned, and both of my colleagues here mentioned, data is number one, and we just need to improve the quality of data. But on that point, and to John's point, I think there are a lot of opportunities to take advantage of things like car-free days that are these small scale. That is an experiment. I was talking about how we need to experiment more. Things like other cities have done when the Olympics were in London. They had to work very closely with the businesses there to understand how goods were moving because they had to shut off a security perimeter. But at the same time, there was huge demand at the businesses because all the people that were there for the Olympics. So they had to develop a lot of solutions that were sort of short-term solutions for the Olympics. Same thing in Philadelphia when the Pope came last fall. Philadelphia I'm from Philadelphia, doesn't have, the number of dignitaries that New York does. So the reaction of the city was very different. And essentially the entirety of Center City, Philadelphia was closed off to cars, or at least important zones. And when those events happen, if we can capture data and understand, okay, what did the local businesses have to do? Did they have to shift their travel times? Did they have to consolidate deliveries? And to pick up on that kind of data, it will help us to do that. Now, for e-bikes specifically, I think coming back to Buzz's point, actually, with density, when we talk about freight, we need to understand the weight and the volume that we can use moving different types of vehicles, and understanding that potential for e-bikes, we need to know what volume, at what point do we reach a volume where it no longer makes sense to use e-bikes, and for which specific types of movements can we use e-bikes. We did a study here in New York. We worked with City Bakery, which is a bakery. Their main location is on 23rd Street. They have satellite locations all over downtown. They use cargo bikes, and we actually put GPS devices on their cargo bikes, and then we had a second partner that we were tracking both cargo bikes and trucks, and basically concluded that City Bakery could make more reliable and faster deliveries using the cargo bikes than they could using motorized vehicles. However, that was because they were moving a relatively light good, a relatively short distance, on demand. And so for their specific business model, there was a lot of potential to shift to e-bikes. In the European cities, as you saw on the introductory presentation, there's a lot of experimentation by the UPS and FedEx and DHLs of the world to use e-bikes. Those kinds of experiments are not going on here in New York. And I've actually tried to discuss this with them, but I haven't gotten a sort of, I don't think I was talking to the right people probably. Why aren't those things being experimented with in New York? Is it because e-bikes are not street legal in New York City, and so the capacity of what can be moved on an e-bike is limited? Is it because the density in Manhattan is so high that it would not economically make sense to use a vehicle that small? And we don't really have a handle on those issues, so that's something we have from talking to partners both in Europe and from other US cities. There's a very successful e-bike operator in Portland, Oregon, as you might expect in Portland, Oregon. But when we talked to him about his vehicles, he said it is absolutely essential to his operations that he be able to use an electric assist motor on that bike. So it absolutely is a political barrier that prevents certain types of movements by occurring by those types of vehicles.
Okay, I guess in the interest of time, we have 10 minutes. I'm going to open to the audience for any question that you have. Nadia or Josh?
Yes, thanks for an opportunity to ask a question here. Basically, there were a couple of things that both this panel covered and the one before, and there's sort of a bridge between the numbers and the quantities and the policy decisions. And I've been involved in all of that in one way or another through my 53 years in New York. Some of them included Mayors Lindsay and Mayor Dinkins, and both of them were actually achieved some really interesting things in an experimental basis. Whether they did the data before or after they took the experiment, maybe it depends on your opinion. I think they were policy issues that were heartfelt. For instance, Washington Square Park was closed to traffic. It used to have a Fifth Avenue going through it. I'm not sure how much data was used to make that decision, but there was passion for people that liked parks. Central Park, there was a tremendous passion to close that. Mayor Lindsay did close Central Park for the first time ever on Sundays, and then even a little bit on Saturdays. Those were very bold political measures for policy issues. Whether they were underpinned with research, in many cases they were underpinned after the fact, but basically that's what was needed to get it done. And Mayor Dinkins actually closed 42nd Street for 3 years in a row on Transportation Day, on a weekday, not on a Saturday or Sunday, but on a business day from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And he fortunately had a good connection with Mother Nature, or whoever, powers that be, and they were perfect, picture-perfect days, all 3 of those days. And the Times had a wonderful mini op-ed piece on how great it was, and the other newspapers did too. That was an example of what an elected official can do. And we do have an election coming up. I'm not sure whether we have a city council member that's ready to run for mayor, but we certainly hope he will soon enough, because then we can actually count on someone that has a vision of what they would like our streets to be like. And that's not necessarily a question, although maybe I should ask it of Giannis, but is there some hope for political leadership that will make a change. Thank you.
Did Dennis want to respond or yeah?
I can't respond from the, I certainly can't respond as well as the councilman if he wants to respond.
I think that we are, I'm proud to see how the city is moving in the right direction. And I know that, you and a group of members of your institution will advocate for a better transportation system where the pedestrians are the center of priority. It will make a big difference. I think that idea to close 42nd Street that you did, I think this is something that we need to be open. This is about planning for the future. This is about following other cities that they are working to make our society more walkable. And I have to give credit to the previous administration, Mayor Bloomberg, and the former DOT commissioner. When they came with the plaza, there was a lot of opposition. I could say that I probably could be one of those that I didn't fully understood, the importance of plaza as now from my role, I see how critical they are. Because we live Sandy, we live the Katrina. These have been happening in the last 15 years. So we know that only few individuals, they don't believe that climate change is real, but it is real. And I think that the only way of how we can all contribute, do our small, very, very important contribution, is by prioritizing cyclists and pedestrians. I'm one of those 1.2 million New Yorkers who has a car. So it's not coming, I'm not one of those new millennium kids. However, I saw my father being born and raised in the Caribbean where the motor transportation, there was a donkey, it was a horse, and it was a big bicycle that they used to have. And cars became a symbol of progress. And I think that, as Russell, my chief of staff, is part of those new millennium, Russell is in charge of legislation communication, then Jose Luis back there is my chief of staff. They are part of that group. And others New Yorkers. That many of them, they don't have a license. That probably they have a license for the purpose of having an ID. But that rely more on public transportation. But that's Manhattan. You cannot go and share the same experience with some people who live in Brooklyn, Queens, who live in Brooklyn, who live in the South Bronx. Like my wife, she was doing a school renewal in the Bronx. And she got to go and supervise like 7 schools. And she was telling me how tough it was for her to move from one school to the other when using only mass transportation. And there's teachers that they would like to go and teach in places in the South Bronx and Brooklyn, and they don't take those schools as the first priority for one reason first, transportation. So, if we look for an equalizer when it comes to closing the gap in the city, transportation is a key one. And again, DOT commissioner, the current Polly Trumbull and the mayor, it's about putting the money where our word is. And when you hear about investing $500 million for a roadway and for the bike lane, that's real action. So I have a hope that, whoever, this current mayor and the DOT, they really are putting the investments. But it's not an easy thing to move agency. Sometimes I speak to some members who are board members of the MTA. They know that they can upgrade the bus system. They know the private sector, they can tell you, we have the technology. However, it's a matter of changing the culture. And that's where we have to keep organizing this type of dialogue, relying on the experts. I think that we have to marry the elected official and the academic, because here we are sitting and working legislation, sometimes without relying on the knowledge that you are able to produce. Those who already are the professor working with PhD candidate, with a student doing master's degree, BA, who really are putting, their time to study those data. So I'm confident that we as a city are moving in the right direction. The question is, do we have the time to do it? Do we have the time to revert, the effect of climate change, to save our city for our children? And that's what I'm calling everyone, to advocate together, to say, guys, pedestrian and cyclists has to be the priority, At the same time, also, we understand why the 1.2 million New Yorkers who own cars, some of them, they should not have a car, but others who live in those transportation deserts, we need to be sure that we operate those transportation deserts in order for those New Yorkers to be asked, can you give us your car for the bus or the train? Thank you.
Thank you, Yahya.
Hi. So the topic is car-free day, and when I read it, for me it looks like the car was the apex of the Industrial Revolution. Right now we're going to electric car, we're going to autonomous vehicle, but we're right now in informational age, the new revolution. So like an idea of actually work from home day. How many more people would stay in their local neighborhoods without overtaxing both transportation and car and highways and working more locally? And the actual highway will be the internet, the age we live in right now. And this is like an academic question.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question that actually goes back to something that was brought up on the first panel, which is also the social aspects. So certainly demand can be reduced by having people telecommute, but what is lost in terms of sort of the personal interactions that occur by not being sitting alone in your office or in your studio apartment if you live in New York, right. But no, I think it's an interesting question, and I think you also raised the issue of, autonomous vehicles. I think we're at a very strange place in transportation research where, 90% of what we do is trying to get people out of, or not 90%, 75% of what we do is trying to get people out of cars, and the other 25% is how can we make more cars fit on the road, and it's sort of this paradox where we want to get people out of cars, but then there's this huge body of connected vehicle research, which is how can we have self-driving cars, and we could stay here for the rest of the week if we wanted to talk about that, but I think that raises a very strange research issue for us to have to deal with.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, politician will talk a lot, sorry. I want to ask something that I think is a very important question. State control in Tamilapuri, last year, he did a study about the economy in Uptown, an area that we are looking for rezoning. And he found out that most residents who live in Uptown, they have to travel an hour and a half to go to work. New York City, with EBC, I believe we have to come back with the number because I know there's some member of the media here, so I'm not 100% accurate in this, but I believe it's close to $300 million that the city provide through EBC to incentivize the business community to create jobs. What about if we increase those incentives for those private sectors that create jobs in those areas of the city where the residents have to travel an hour or an hour and a half to go to work? Because the reason why City Bike has been working good is because the major group who use it, they live in the financial district. Now it's moving to the Queens and close to Manhattan and to Brooklyn, a little bit uptown. But still, the centerpiece of City Bike was designed thinking about the financial district, where people work like 40 blocks away from where they live. So it was a very inconvenient for people to say, we can take a City Bike, go enjoy the river, the water, the view, and go to work. But we had the other percentage. The budget director in New York City, 3 years ago, he went to City Hall and he said, close to 50% of New Yorkers live on the poverty line. So half of New Yorkers live in areas where they have to travel an hour or an hour and a half in average to go to work. So it will make a big difference if we want to reduce, the need of individual to go and travel. To say, can we provide double? Now we are providing I think it's close to $300 million to the private sector who create jobs. Can we double that incentive to those who the job that they create
are in those areas where people live and they travel so far so that they don't have to, think about other transportation because sometimes it's not the train and bus that they use, but it's also cars.
I'm Vince Weigel, I live on the west side of Manhattan, and I heard them talking about why do we have vehicles that are coming and waiting 45 minutes at the bridge or more to come to the city? The answer is, what are the questions of why? Where we are too, if you have out of the 1.2 million vehicles you're talking about, I don't know how many we had on the west side, but it's so hard to have a vehicle on the west side. You have one privately. It's hard to park. It's hard to handle. The garages are reduced in numbers and very expensive to live there. Why do people have them? Well, sometimes it's because they have to go to work somewhere and there is no way to be able to go except for that. I think very few people, and I could be wrong about it, use their cars to go to commute to Midtown from there. All right, you never want to go to the park. Also, there's a lot of people, and I don't need the numbers, who go out of town on the weekend. There's a backyard out of town. We should be happy that they do, or you'd find out how many more people are going to be in parks and at beaches and everything in the city. You ever seen in the Sunday how it kind of empties out a little bit? Well, it makes things more livable, the fact that people go. But many times there's no other way to go. So how do we find the whys of how people are using the motor vehicle, and then try to find solutions for what it is? So that's the first I've heard of a solution that's looking to satisfy a why, which is when people are commuting long distance, whether it be by vehicle or by mass transportation, an hour and a half, bring industry closer to where people work. It makes a big difference. Find a way for how we can find a way for people on the west side to be able to not have a car. I don't myself, I go out and rent, but so I have to rent outside the city. I have to get outside the city to do it. It takes time. And I have to pay a tax to the city for renting a car when I'm not keeping my car in the city. I'm doing something good for the city. Why don't you find a way to let New Yorkers get a break on that tax? Anyway, any ideas that you have in terms of how do we find the whys and how do we get people to change their behavior and give them solutions to the things they need? What are their needs?
That's a really wonderful point. And actually, I have colleagues in Paris who did a study on parking and how it's influenced by car rentals and car sharing and ride sharing. And they did find that for use of services like Uber and then their version of Zipcar, which is temporary car rental, things that allow for street parking, that freed up 3 to 4 parking spots on the street. So if we could do a similar study here in Manhattan of how these services impact our use of parking spaces, I think we could really help people understand how parking a car 95% of the time really impacts their bottom line and their quality of life living in the city.
I'll just follow up on that point from a freight perspective, always the freight perspective, but that's exactly the problem. And when we start talking about e-commerce, I also live on the west side in a building with 1,000 residential units. We're probably generating somewhere between 1.5 and 2 packages per resident a week, which means there's 3,000 deliveries coming through the front door of my building. Our parking regulations were not put in place to recognize that type of use of the street. And unfortunately, the only reason I think about the impact I'm having when I order something online is because I do research in this area, but people don't connect how that decision making happens. Now you see on the industry side, the good thing about freight is that the things that are good for the city and the environment are also good for the bottom line in freight. Minimizing fuel use, having fully loaded trucks, all of these things are good for freight. So you see Amazon offering things like, when you order from Amazon, if you're a Prime member, they'll offer you a financial incentive, like, will you take $3 of music to take this delivery in 3 days instead of 2? You see Fresh Direct having the green delivery option. The green delivery option on Fresh Direct does not mean that they have, they're using electric trucks or something like that. It's that someone in your neighborhood has already ordered during that time frame, so it allows them to consolidate the deliveries. But getting that done at sort of a more city level scale requires first the public understanding what the drivers of that demand are.
Maybe the last question.
I have more of a comment than a question, but I'll take it. We're talking about, can this be done? And I want to tell you, it can be done. Because my parents bought a home in Staten Island in 1959. I was born shortly after. Remember, the Verrazano Bridge did not open until 1964. So that meant the bus or train to the ferry to get to work downtown in Manhattan. I have never learned to drive. My parents have never owned an automobile. My father's wallet was lost or stolen shortly after I was born, and he was too busy. He never bothered to replace it. He never replaced his driver's license. My mother has never drove in New York City in her life. My friends and acquaintances who own cars and drive in New York City are to be believed. And knowing my own experience, living in Staten Island, although granted, one of the places where we have good access to buses and a train not far away, going car-free is not only possible, it is far easier and cheaper than ever trying to keep a car in New York City. I would consider a car an intolerable hardship in this city. It can be done.
Thank you. Maybe the floor is yours.
An earlier question, thanks, because I don't know if I'm the only one that read this report, but I read a report a couple of years ago that said basically that owning or having access, not owning, but having access to a private car doubles a worker's chance of getting a job and keeping that job, and triples the chance of making more money on it. Which answers the question, why would you go to the expense of having a car? Because the job pays more than the car expenses. What surprised me about this report, it was done, I think, in 1991, and I only came across it like 2 years ago. I have suspicion it was suppressed because it did not feed into the narrative that everybody says. Now, my original question was, are you in favor of a cross-harbor tunnel, freight tunnel?
I mean, we need more capacity. Yes, more than 90% of the freight comes into New York City by truck, so we're never going to solve our street problem if we're not using other modes to bring freight in.
I live in Sunset Park. Within walking distance, I have UPS, FedEx, and New York's U.S. Postal Service, all making deliveries, and now Amazon has moved in. Okay? And at the same time, I was reading in the Financial Times that Amazon had bought 10,000 trailers. They're getting into the delivery business. It's getting too expensive. They're also down in Washington. We now have, once upon a time, someone from DOT told me that they don't allow 53-foot trailers anywhere except on the Dan Wick to go to Kennedy Airport, whereas I see them every day when I walk up 4th Avenue. They're everywhere. Amazon is down in Washington lobbying for 77-foot articulated trailers. So cargo bikes, forget about it. It's not gonna, we have what is called expensive cargo here. That's the only stuff that comes in at Kennedy Airport. And nobody is thinking about putting in extra lanes or upgrading the Belt Parkway to Kennedy Airport to draw traffic away from I-278 and away from I-95 to deliver directly to Kennedy Airport. There would be no congestion problem because all the deliveries are at night when the planes come in.
Yeah, so a few just follow-ups on that. The cargo bikes are not going to solve the long-distance transportation solution. We're very specific to dense urban areas, first of all. The larger vehicles, unfortunately, not unfortunately because we don't necessarily want a 77-foot trailer running through the city, the physical size of our streets in many areas is not going to allow.
Interstate?
In New York City, currently the largest trailer legally allowed on any street in New York is 48 foot, except for last year an exception was passed to allow access to JFK Airport because JFK loses economic competitiveness as an airport if 50 feet.
I-278 at 38th Street, 4th Avenue turns onto the intermodal coast roadway and goes.
I 100% agree with you. I said legally operating. I didn't say operating. There are 53-foot trailers all over New York City. But that freight is moving because New York City is demanding it. So,
Yes.
so unless we want to tell New York City residents, no, you can't get your Amazon delivery. No, you can't, and there's cost associated with that. So, okay, you see what's happening to retail stores. They're disappearing. And that's because,
They go to Costco.
for now.
Okay,
Microlab.
okay, maybe we have to have a chance to thank our
Yeah.
panelists. And thank you again for attending and sticking around. And I guess Earth Day will be on April 22nd, and you can give your card. And you can,
Who's the one that built it?